Welcome to Talking Pictures. My name is Christian Genzel. I'm a filmmaker and film journalist from Salzburg, Austria. Talking Pictures is a podcast series in which I talk to the people who made some of my favorite movies. For today's episode, I've had the immense pleasure of talking to screenwriter Mike Rich about his very first film, Finding Forrester. Directed by Gus Van Sant, the film came out in the year 2000 and features the legendary original James Bond, Sean Connery, as a reclusive writer in the vein of J.D. Salinger named William Forrester, who starts mentoring a young 16-year-old black kid from the Bronx, Jamal, played by then-newcomer Rob Brown, who divides his time between playing basketball with his friends and at school and his secret interest in writing and literature. The film also stars a ton of other wonderful actors, including F. Murray Abraham as a condescending professor of literature, Anna Paquin as Jamal's love interest Claire, Michael Nouri as Claire's father, Michael Pitt as one of Jamal's schoolmates, and even rapper Busta Rhymes as Jamal's brother. It's a film which I've seen many times over the years, and its themes of studying great literature, finding your own creativity, developing an unusual friendship out of a student-mentor relationship, and looking back at the twists and turns of the past have always resonated very strongly with me. In our conversation, Mike Rich remembers how he wrote the script without having any expectations of it getting made, and its journey to suddenly having Sony, Gus Van Sant, and Sean Connery interested in it. He discusses developing the story with Van Sant and Connery. He talks about the wonderful performances, especially by Rob Brown. And naturally, he talks about the process of writing, about sports, and all the other themes and ideas of his story. We also touch upon some of Mike's other films, such as the baseball drama The Rookie starring Dennis Quaid, the ice hockey movie Miracle starring Kurt Russell, the horse racing film Secretariat starring Diane Lane and John Malkovich, or the Pixar movie Cars 3. My interview with Mike Rich was conducted in connection with our German language podcast Lichtspielplatz. So, if you speak German, please visit lichtspielplatz.at and check out episode number 79, which features an in-depth discussion of Finding Forrester. If you enjoy my interviews here on Talking Pictures, please consider heading over to patreon.com/talkingpicturespodcast to support the production of new episodes. And make sure to check out our other interviews on our website, talkingpicturespodcast.com. So without any further ado, here is Mike Rich. So Mike, before we get into Finding Forrester, I'd like to talk a little bit about your background, because I saw that you have a background in business and you worked as a radio newscaster. So I was curious how, one thing led to the other and how that led into the movies.
It's the path less traveled for sure. It was this whole experience was one of the most, if not the most unexpected detour in my life, and a detour that has now lasted for more than 2 decades. But yes, I was working here in Portland, Oregon, at a radio station doing the news for a morning drive radio show. And I've always had an interest in writing primarily short stories, but I had decided that because my love of film kind of dictated, I think, that I was going to try just as a hobby to try to write a screenplay. And I wrote 3 really awful screenplays, but they served a purpose because they allowed me to learn a little bit. And I was on the air one day, and we were interviewing Joyce Maynard. She used to have a column in the Washington Post, and she's kind of renowned for having an affair with J.D. Salinger. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about the authors of the prior century were just these rock stars, and they all were kind of reclusive, and it just didn't, it was hard to get through the wall. And I remember that line. She said that in an interview, that nobody could get through the wall. And for me, it was just, well, what if somebody got through the wall? And that's where it started. And I wrote the screenplay with no expectation of anything, entered it in a competition that the Academy sponsors, the Nickel Fellowship competition. And I remember getting the first note that said basically, or email saying, "Congratulations, you're a semifinalist in this competition." And then I really thought that was going to be the end of it. But in reality, it was just the start of a 3 to 4 month uh, journey where Sony Pictures buys the film one by one. You know, Sean Connery comes on board, Ed Murray Abraham comes on board, Anna Paquin comes on board, and I'm sitting up here in my home going, "What is happening?" You know, so that's kind of where it started for me, and it's lasted, like I say, for more than 2 decades.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing first movie to have so many like really legends attached to a project.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss for sure. That helped me out in that first few months.
And it's funny because there's this moment in the script where Jamal talks to Forrester about competitions, and Sean Connery sort of dismisses that and says, "Yeah, I did that once, and he won the Pulitzer." So,
He won the Pulitzer. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there was one line in there too where it was, basically Forrester was telling Jamal, what the absolute best moment is. It's before you hand it over to a producer, or it's still just yours. And there is a moment where you hand it over to the folks who are going to make it real, and then those folks hand it over to the audience, which you know then anything can happen at that point.
mhm. So what was the journey of the script when people came in? I mean, Connery, I mean, I'm sure he had notes and ideas on what to do with the character, and I'm sure Gus Van Sant had ideas on what to do with it.
Yeah, it was not close to being a perfect script, but I think we all knew that it was a good story. And I remember asking Kerry Richmond of Sony Pictures, why did you buy the script? And they said, because we knew we had a movie.
Hmm.
Uh, and for me, it was, yes, everyone had notes. Like I said, I had never been in this position before, but everyone, Sean included, Sean was very active and just came up with these little gems. I mean, like the one where the moment where he's turning his socks inside out, and he basically tells Jamal, it doesn't it hurts the toes to have the
Hmm.
and so I just latched on to those things. And at one point, so the irony of the whole thing was I was living in Portland, and then when Gus Van Sant comes on board to direct, he's living in Portland,
Oh.
which was just such an amazing happy coincidence, because there was a little the Bijou Cafe. And I remember we would get together in this corner of the Bijou Cafe and we would work on the script. And that was, I think the whole story and the whole film really benefited from that, because Gus was just coming off of Good Will Hunting. And
Hmm.
and he just was served as such a mentor to me, to and when you get notes, I thought that, because I hadn't been in the business, that, okay, this is my laundry list. I need to check off all of these
Hmm.
boxes. And Gus said, no, 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 no. He just never forget, no one knows the story better than you do.
Hmm.
And that helped me out, gave me kind of uh, a, a push forward. But it was just it was a great environment for a first time writer. And they gave me the opportunity to succeed, and I'm grateful for that.
Hmm. So what were some of the elements that were added or changed during that process?
The big one was, and I look back on it now, and I realize it was just such a flaw to the story, but it was the big thing that hurdle that we had to get past, was to come up with a believable story of how these two individuals, Jamal and Forrester, got together. And
Hmm.
uh, and I remember, when in the script that I gave to the Nickel Fellowship, the mechanism was for Jamal. he had this desire, this drive to at least get his writing out there. And so he was posting some of his short stories anonymously on the internet.
Hmm.
And then he started getting these, kind of cryptic responses from this one person. And now I look back on it and I go, well, number one, that just strikes me as awkward at best and creepy at worst. That was
Hmm.
happening, and it just didn't, because it needed to be that Jamal didn't want to put it out there for anybody, anonymous or whatever it might be. And that was a big note from that was an overriding note from the studio. And I remember just Gus and I were thinking, and at that point, Sean wasn't even on the project quite yet, in engaging on a notes standpoint. But that's where I came up with this idea of that he was this mercurial character that the kids all called the Window, because
Hmm.
that's all they ever saw him at, and uh, and then the challenge, the dare, all of that, which put Jamal in his apartment, and then he leaves his backpack behind. And I remember Amy Pascal was the head of Sony Pictures at that point, and um, she said, "That's fantastic. That just pushed the film into a much better place, and it really served as kind of a domino to set off a lot of other really, I think, strong things. But I look back on that and I just go, boy, thank goodness they had Sony had the vision to go ahead and push this thing forward, even though
Hmm.
it was not a perfect script.
Hmm.
Yeah, there were so many other just gems along the way, that presented themselves in kind of unexpected moments. Sean, this basically turned out to be his last film in a leading role.
Hmm.
He would come in and have lunch with us and the boys, and Rob Brown and that group, and um, they were just speaking in the vernacular of their age and their time, and that was where they kept calling each other dog, and Sean was just so puzzled by that, and he basically said, where I grew up, calling someone a dog was a term of disrespect, and they said, oh, no, 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 it's and so they educated him on what dog meant. And so, as much as I would like to claim just outright credit for that, it actually happened at lunch over early on in the process.
Yeah, and it's such a weird thing because I mean nobody was even talking about things going viral at that stage, right? And there's this line that all of a sudden is everywhere.
Exactly, exactly. And that actually, after the film came out, the very first, you're the man now dog.com
Mhm.
was one of the pioneer sites for that. Um, so we can add that to the list of unexpected things that surrounded this project.
You mentioned J.D. Salinger, and I mean he's an obvious touchstone, I think, for that type of writer, the recluse who's written this one generation-defining book and then sort of decided not to do it any longer. I was wondering if some of the themes and some of the stories of Salinger also had an influence on the story itself.
Yeah, I just I think it's not just Salinger. It's F. Scott Fitzgerald. So many
Mm.
of those writers. They dealt in a lot of those stories that they wrote. The iconic ones just came from a uh, a moment or period of immense loss, or there was a driving force behind those things. And so, for me, it was trying to come up with what, was, the driving creative force for him to write this one book. And, it was a combination of, things, including the death of his brother, that drove him in that. And they were, I mean, so many of those, they had no interest in publicity. They had no interest.
Mhm.
They just, this was this was who they were, and this was the itch that needed to be scratched.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where I was shaping Forrester's character from initially, and then when Rob came on board, then it presented another opportunity for growth because he was in a way, kind of looking in the mirror
Mhm.
creatively. So.
Mhm. I mean, there's a lot of literature in general in the film. I don't know if you had any say in the actual shelves that you see in people's apartments. Any suggestions on which books they might have?
No, it was that was Gus entirely, and I always liked. It was not only the books and the titles, but there was one. I think it was Joyce, and it was great because it looked like it hadn't been cracked at
Hmm.
all.
Yeah, that's Finnegan's Wake.
Yeah, Finnegan's Wake, right? And I thought that was just brilliant on Gus's part to do that. But I mean, just yeah, I consumed a lot of the classics, as you might imagine, and that dates back to when I grew up in a really small town in the northeastern part of Oregon, and I mean, population 2,000 then and population 2,000 now, and I was fortunate enough they had a bookstore there called the Book Loft, and I can so clearly remember after school was over, I would go down and Rich Schneider was there, and he and his wife owned, and he was the one who, would suggest to me, you should read this, you should read that, and
Mhm.
he would kind of I mean, all writing starts with reading,
Mhm.
and so I was fortunate to have that person in my life who could give me a lot of those books to read, and it paid dividends, years later.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there's also a lot of about the process of writing, obviously, in the film, including some very good advice, like the first draft comes from the heart, and then
Art.
you edit it with your mind.
Yeah.
Um, how much does your writing experience or writing style, how much does that reflect what you see in the film, or how much does it differ from how Jamal writes?
Yeah, no, a lot. It does because the whole process of just putting it down and that first draft, not worrying about the rewrite. The rewrite will come later. Just trying to get it all out there, spill it all out. Um, and that's where, accidents happen, or accidents isn't the right word, but um, just the basis of what you can refine. And
Mhm.
so I wrote very quickly, the first draft, and I'm not one of those writers that just already has an outline, scene by
Mhm.
scene, page by page. I mean, I know where I'm starting, and I know where I'm going, but it's like a journey in a car. I may be driving to this city, and I know I'm going to get there, but if
Mhm.
there's a turn in the road that looks interesting, why not take that turn? And if it does proves interesting, great. If it doesn't, you know, get back on the road and keep heading toward the final destination. So that was my process, and I mean, and a ton of walking, if that makes sense. Uh, Gus told me once, if you're out there walking for 2 hours, that's still writing, and I
Mhm.
always remembered that.
Mhm. It's also an interesting piece of advice where Jean Connery gives Jamal the old article and says, "Well, sometimes you just have to get into the rhythm of typing," and he
Exactly.
asks him to sort of just type what's written on the page, and then at some point, whenever you feel like your own words are coming up, then feel free to do your own story. Is that something
Right.
that you did?
Yeah. A variation on that. I would, if I was having a particularly good day writing, uh, and I could see where the next 3 or 4 hours could go, most of the time I would stop. And that was because I knew that it would give me a head start the next day. I
Hmm.
knew that I would not be in a position where I sit down, pour the first of many cups of coffee, and and uh, and instantly just stop. Uh, it just gave me that jolt
Hmm.
to get the momentum forward moving. And then so that's kind of a variation on the Forrester method of just getting going, just the
Hmm.
rhythm of it all. And there is a real rhythm to it in my opinion. Um, it's often the writing of a script is, you have usually this collection of 60 scenes typically there, and they start off with you don't want to accomplish one thing in a scene because you need to accomplish three or four things in a scene if you can, because of the um, spareness of a screenplay, which
Hmm.
can be at 100 to 120 pages. You have to accomplish a lot with a little, and so for me it was always what put the substance of the scene in there, and then make music out of it,
Hmm.
have that rhythm, and speak the words, the dialogue out loud, because there are sometimes that it reads well and it doesn't roll off the tongue, and so it's all like a very very musical, just to get to that point where it has the rhythm, and then also just taking that core bit of information that you're going to put into the scene and then disguising that so that the audience doesn't know it's being told something.
Yeah, I think in that regard, the short stories of Salinger are always little
Mm.
masterpieces because I mean, there's so much information and just sometimes one sentence or just a couple of words, and I mean, he has a couple of pages
Right,
and he creates an
right.
entire world, right?
Yeah. Before I forget, you had mentioned some of these other writers, and one of the writers that I put into the story and plays a pivotal role is Coleridge.
Hmm.
And I remember getting a handful of letters from these literary professors at colleges, and they were thanking me for finally someone puts a spotlight on Coleridge,
Mm.
uh, and so I still have some of those letters up on my desk, because when we made the film 25 years ago, reading for pleasure was not an endangered species at that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
and uh, and I look back on it, and I'm so proud of what we did overall with the story, and just putting the spotlight on
Mm.
authors like Coleridge, and in a indirect way so many of the other greats. And so at a time when the reading for pleasure is not what it used to be, I'm proud of what we did with that story as a whole.
Yeah, and I hear that from a lot of people, friends of mine who work at the university, and all those great writers. People aren't just even aware of their names anymore. They
I
just
know.
sort of get lost to history, I guess. And I mean, that's why when I see those images, when he has the stack of books, and there's Ken Kesey and there's James Joyce and everybody, it's like it makes you want to pick up a good book, right, and really dive into it.
Right. Right. And I'm so glad that Gus put in Ken Kesey there, because, as someone who lives in Oregon, that's where Ken Kesey,
Hmm.
spent almost his entire life. And um, every year there's a rodeo in northeastern Oregon called the Pendleton Roundup, and one of his last books, Kesey's last book, was The Last Go Around, and it was about
Hmm.
that the start of that, and Kesey was so brilliant in his subtlety,
Hmm.
and so just another example of an individual that crept into our film.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, there's this whole other world in the film, and that's a world that you've revisited in a lot of the other projects, which is the world of sports, in this case, basketball. How did that develop? I mean, you obviously have an affinity for sports in general. So, how did the whole basketball story develop in Finding Forrester?
Yeah, it's and I do. I'm a sports fan, and so that was kind of a comfort zone for me, for someone who hadn't written a script that was being made, to have that as a real cornerstone of the film as well. And the thing that's always fascinating for me about sports is there's typically not much gray area. You either win or you lose. And the pressures that are placed on young athletes in particular, I
Mm,
mean, those that can make it to a professional, that's a different thing. But on our young athletes and the expectations of them, and I thought that would just be a perfect analogy um, for Jamal's character to live in a world where the expectations, his academic expectations, when all of a sudden he
mm,
sees himself in a wonderful situation where he's talking with Forrester, he's learning this, he's excited about this, but the expectations are different for him because of the desire to have tap into his basketball skills, and I just thought that was a really strong place to have him struggle with and wrestle with.
Yeah, I love that moment when his teacher explains to his mom and said that's where he gets his acceptance.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, this isn't a world where you impress anybody by knowing a book by Ken Kesey. This is a world where you impress people by being good on a basketball court.
right, right. So it just the development of the script. It's when I look back on it too, having being as this was my first film, the one thing that in those early drafts of the script that I later did not repeat um, because I was working with so many of these great actors and actresses, which was what they could do without
Mm,
saying anything. And I think those initial early drafts, before we made some of those changes, if there was something that I wanted Sean Connery's character to say, I gave him dialogue to say it.
hmm.
And then, like you could see how much they could communicate with just a simple tilt of the head or a nod, and so in a strange way, the script kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter because of the skills of you know the F. Murray Abrahams and the Michael Nouris and whoever it might be. And lost in all of that was the miracle of Rob Brown's performance, because this was a young kid, 14
Mm,
years old, just about, I think he turned 15 while we were on the set, who had never acted at all, nothing. And that's where Gus shines. If you look at his library of films,
mm.
um, so often there are actors that haven't done anything before, and it's an amazing talent that he has and a skill that he has to nurture and end up with a cast that delivers magic.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by Rob's performance. I mean, he's the heart of the movie essentially. I mean, I know everybody's looking at Connery, obviously, but I mean, without Rob Brown in the middle, in the center of the picture, I mean, none of this would work.
No, it's yeah, he's it's his story.
Yeah.
It's Sean's movie, but it's his story. He was in every scene in the movie except for two. So, if Rob fails, then we all fail. But he didn't come close to failing. He was just, and I've stayed in touch with him over the years. I talk to him every so often,
Mm,
and now he's sharing pictures of his children with me, and it's just
mm.
uh, a wonderful little coda to the entire story because his personal story actually was a bit similar to
Oh, really?
yeah. He and his mother, struggled along, and he's a brilliant young man. And when he went to that first rehearsal, he went to that or casting call.
Hmm.
Uh, he went there with a friend, the friend who was the one who had acting experience, and Rob just went there to see if he could get on as an extra and maybe pay put a couple dollars to his cell phone bill. So he was certainly able to do all of that by the end of the process.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Yeah,
I'm I'm looking at his performance and I'm wondering, I mean, I would probably be so intimidated being as a first time actor being on a set with Connery and F. Murray Abraham and Anna Paquin and having a director like Gus Van Sant. I mean, everybody there is a legend, right? I mean,
yeah.
I would be so intimidated.
His first audition went well. Got a call back. That one went well, and then this was another stroke of genius by Gus. Called him back for another one, not telling him that he was going to be with Sean Connery, and he just wanted to see how he would perform uh, in a stressful situation. And
Hmm.
I still have that. It's I don't even know if it's on DVD, but it was VH the Winwood VHS when people forget movies that came out in the year 2000. The dailies were on were on videotape. We were still in the infancy of a lot of things at that point, but
Hmm.
Rob rose to every challenge. That's the bottom line.
Hmm. There's a great moment at the end of the film where with the final game, where he's supposed to, he has those,
Free throws.
and I don't want to like spoil the mystery of it or not. But I was wondering. I mean, I like the fact that we don't know if he's missing them on purpose or not. But is that something that you developed as an idea? Was that something where, initially he was supposed to win the game, or initially it was clear that he would lose it on purpose or something like that?
No, I wanted to leave. Ambiguity is such a wonderful thing, I think. And you, there was some talk. We had a test screening, and I think the studio loved where the film was at. But if they had any reservation, it was, and I'll follow suit and not give certain things away. Um, but I think there was some consideration that maybe they carved 10 minutes off of it and dropped certainly one of the key things. And I'm always thankful to the people who were in that focus group at the end. There were 10, there was 20, there were 10 women and 10 men. It was and they threw that out there. Do you think we should have wrapped this up a little bit earlier? And they said,
Hmm.
are you kidding? That's that is just what gives the movie its soul,
Hmm.
and I'm so grateful to them for that because I mean the old story of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid at the end. Do
Hmm.
we the conversations that they were having of, well, maybe we should not let Butch and Sundance get killed in that final standoff. And again, that's a perfect example of those '70s films that
Hmm.
they just gave free license to a lot of those uh, creatives, and we ended up with movies that have stood the test of time.
Hmm. Yeah, they're so much more powerful when you have this sort of when there are events where you have to think about them, that sort of resonate with you in a certain way, and like you said, the ambiguity of something where it actually makes me wonder what it is that was happening or what was going on in somebody's head. And I mean, this is the stuff that keeps going after the movie's over, right? I mean, a lot of films are wrapped up very nicely, and then you sort of forget after a while what it was all about. But if there are certain questions that linger in your head, certain stuff that's out of the ordinary, I think that's what stays with you.
I always, I mean, if you could tell me beforehand that four people would go to see the film and then they would be discussing it afterwards and they would have four different points of view, I would say that I've done my job, you know.
Hmm.
But as long as you give them all the substance to make that, you know, their determination of what the end result was. I got to tell you, one of the greatest treats and that I always have when a film comes out, you know, you have that short period of time where it's in theatrical release, shorter now than then for sure.
Hmm.
But you know, as a screenwriter, in contrast to a novelist, if someone writes a novel and it's a wonderful novel and someone who's read it tells that person, that author, that it was, that's secondhand information. We can't see that person responding
Hmm.
to the written word, but we do get that opportunity when we write screenplays. If we've often wondered, you know, boy, I think that'll get a laugh. Well, we get to find out if it'll get a laugh,
Hmm.
and or if it's an emotional point, we get to see that and feel that, and that's one of the beauties of cinema from a writing
Hmm.
standpoint.
Yeah, there's another moment I think that's a little bit like this, where there's a little bit of ambiguity. That's the relationship between Jamal and Claire, the Anna Paquin
Mhm. Mhm.
character. Because I was actually talking to my friend who I'm doing the podcast with, and we're talking about what Claire's father's intentions were. Was he actively trying to, like, was he saying that, okay, I don't want you to get into a relationship with this person, or was he just trying to be, I don't know, like a good host, or just sort of trying to steer her away from that without actually trying to sabotage the relationship? And again, I think that's a really interesting, very little moment, and that where Michael Nouri is out on the balcony and he sort of ends that moment between them, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean, we don't know for sure, but
yeah,
that's what makes
yeah,
it interesting.
and I actually, that's one of the rare things that now, even now, when I look back at that, um, because certainly at that and on that first scene, you know, it was pretty clear what he thought of this, and but it
Mm.
was it got progressively more vague, if you will,
Mhm.
and I like that. I like that one from that relationship standpoint, keeping that just kind of. Um, a little undecided. I thought that
Mhm.
was that's what I wanted to do as well.
Yeah, I remember it was very surprising when I first saw the film because I was sort of expecting it to lead into either a full-blown relationship between the two or into full-blown drama because, there's something going on that prevents the two of them coming together. And instead that the whole thing just sort of peters out because of this little incident. I think that's so much more interesting, but so much more subtle, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad because that's and again that taps back into thank goodness we had the actors that we did have. You know, just so much is said when Claire and Jamal in the last scene before William goes in and delivers his monologue, just sitting next to each other without a word.
Mhm.
That's that says more than you can with dialogue, for sure.
Mhm. Were you invited to be on set during the shoot?
Yeah, we filmed in basically two locations. We filmed in Vancouver or Toronto, excuse me.
Mhm.
So many films in Vancouver that I sometimes lose track of them. We filmed in Toronto, and I think initially there was some conversation as to, well, we can do a lot in Toronto. We can that can serve as New York, and Gus really drew the line on. He said, we are going to shoot in the Bronx. We are going to shoot in New York, and we didn't do all of it, but we did a good share of it. And there was a scene in Yankee Stadium, which was a pivotal scene, certainly for Forrester's character. And we were not going to use a Toronto baseball stadium for Yankee Stadium, and I remember that night when we filmed that, because the Yankees are very particular about their stadium, and they basically only allowed three people out on the field. It was basically, may have been four: Gus, camera, and the two, Sean and Rob. Yeah, that scene, or just those moments where the cinematography, Harris Savides was just brilliant, as to giving it kind of a dark, there was just an understated beauty to his work as well.
Yeah, the whole sense of place and the sense of location and the feel of it all. I think that really comes across in the apartment, but also, in the street. The whole opening moments of the film, like this little montage during the opening credits. I mean, that's like a little documentary, almost, where it's just impressions of what life's like in this part of the city.
And I'll tell you, I sure appreciate the people who asked, did I write that opening rap? And I go, no. I had nothing to do with that. But it was so many of those, moments. And I keep going back to Gus and his work, what he could bring to the surface. And so many of the, F. Murray Abraham. And there are just so many stories there. One of the things that I really appreciated about Sean's help with this film was when we were there in the home stretch, and he had yet to deliver his monologue at the school, and I was working on, because that thing just needed to be, that's such a pivotal moment that I'm just trying to get it just exact. And I would send versions of it over to Sean, and he was always gracious, but he would say, no, I think we can do better in this particular area. And I said, well, what if I, at the end of the rehearsal today, maybe I can just come over and we can kind of walk through it, and we can literally talk through some things. And he said, that's a great idea. And so that's how we cobbled that one together to a point where everybody felt good about it. But at the end of each of those sessions, and this was in his trailer, he would pour a bottle, grab this bottle of scotch off the wall, and he would pour a couple of glasses of scotch, and then he would just tell me about the industry. And it was, I look back on it now, and it was one of those surreal moments in so many ways, because this was his 74th film, and it was my first. And so, and it's just, you have moments where he's shifting and he's talking about the Bond movies, and I'm thinking to myself, I cannot believe I'm sitting in this trailer having a glass of scotch with Sean Connery, who's telling stories about the Bond movies. And but I think he took kind of a shine to my story, and how unexpected, against the grain it was. And so he was constantly giving me some tips and some guidance, and I'm really thankful for that.
Oh, that's almost surreal to have this kind of
Completely
experience,
surreal, completely surreal. Yeah, and when the film was over and we had our premiere in New York City, and after it was done, I went over to Sean to thank him, because he was an executive producer on the film. And the reality is, of course, that if at any day during the entire process Sean Connery had decided that that maybe he should go to another writer or something in the process, because it's so rare for someone in their,
Mm,
certainly in their first film, to get a sole writing credit. And and I went up to him and I thanked him for that, because I knew and he knew that could have stopped at any juncture, simply with
mm,
him placing a call to the studio and saying, let's move on. Um, and instead of saying, oh, you're welcome, just but in true Sean Connery style, he looked at me and he said, Mike, if the words hadn't have been there, you wouldn't have been either. And I, I to this day, as you can tell, I can just rattle that off, and it's such a better story than if Sean had just given me a cursory shake of the hand and saying, he and I could not have written it any better. And
yeah.
uh, yeah, yeah,
It's a real movie line, actually.
it actually is, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we just, even with the Jamal and his group of friends, with Fly and Damani and all of those characters. Um,
mm,
just watching those guys, there were times where, you know, I would be on the set and it was during a break and you'd see those four characters out there playing 2-on-2 basketball at just a
mm,
court. The one you see the very first at the start of the film, they would be out there just
mm,
being kids. And at that point, I had no expectation as to whether there would be a second film or a second opportunity to write. So I was soaking up everything that I could. So I was out there for a month beforehand, and then was always kind of on call. But as a writer,
mm,
um, no news is good news. If they're not calling you or they're not bringing you in to do something, then it's probably in good hands. The entire
mm.
process. Yeah.
Now, I was wondering, how much did you follow the reception of the film? Did you read the reviews? Did you, I don't know, go to a lot of screenings?
Yeah, I did. And the film by and large received very positive response. It got absolutely butchered by the New York Times, but
Mm,
that's and I'm that's the way it works. If you're going to be in this business,
yeah.
but the majority of the reviews were terrific, and it was different back when the film came out. Here, of course, you just now click on Rotten Tomatoes and you get a summary, and you get, back then you actually had to go out and get a newspaper. People
Mm,
forget that we were in the early days of the internet, so it was like you've seen those moments in film where they go out to grab a newspaper to discover what happened, and that was the case with this film. But yeah, the reminder is, you're never going to get a 100% score.
mm,
So I always said, I'd much rather have 70% just love it and 30% have strong thoughts about it than 100% saying it's okay. Um,
yeah.
yeah. So, and that, I think Forrester fit into that bill.
Yeah, I remember the reviews were, I mean, most of them which I read were very good. I
Yeah.
think one thing that I always found a little bit disappointing is that everybody compared it to Good Will Hunting, because, I mean, that was what Gus Van Sant at that point was so known for. I mean, winning all the Academy Awards and everything for that. And so a lot of the reviews were kind of good, but they always had this sort of sense of, oh, this is sort of in the same ballpark as Good Will Hunting. So they weren't exactly calling it a retreat, but it was sort of hinting at the fact that it's there are some similarities, and I always found that was I don't know, kind of unfair to the film to not be seen on its own terms, but to sort of be in the shadow of that previous film.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I frankly, when I got the phone call saying that Gus Van Sant was going to direct this, there was a part of me that was because it followed Good Will Hunting. I mean, it was they were right next to each other, and I was a little surprised at that. But then, the more I got to know Gus, and the more I saw what he was doing with this particular story, I go, okay, this is. This shares some DNA, but it's a different film. It really is, and I know he's proud of the film as well. And so it was a beautiful journey, that's for sure. For me, like I said at the very start, the most unexpected journey I could have, ever imagined. And then the success of that film also allowed me the opportunity to do other films, which there's never a guarantee of that, and I still to this day it's gets so much response of all the films that I've made. It's the one that um, is probably most mentioned, and
Hmm.
and the other thing too, which is great, we get these quarterly reports of um, for residuals. And I look at the international presence of the film is just astounding to me. That it's yeah, it's to see that it continues to be viewed in so many places around the world is just does my heart good.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, John Connery obviously is plays a big part in that because he's such a legend and star all over the world. I mean, wherever you go, people sort of know Connery as the first Bond, and even if they haven't seen a lot of other films with him, but still he is this icon that um,
Yeah.
you really care about and you want to see on screen.
I get so many people who ask me if I when I was writing it, did I have Sean Connery in mind? And of course, the answer is no,
Hmm.
because I didn't expect anything to happen with it. So I said, I actually, if push comes to shove, I was maybe picturing like a Robert Duvall,
Hmm.
um, and so when I got the call that Sean Connery was going to come on board. Um, I immediately was already jumping to okay, okay, that's a totally different, very distinct voice, and it
Hmm.
actually made the distinct quality of his voice made it pretty easy because I could hear his voice when I was writing those
Hmm.
sequences, and I knew just by his delivery, I knew, okay, that works. Or nope, I can't picture Sean Connery saying that.
Hmm.
And so that made the whole process a little smoother, just because of who he was.
I read somewhere that Bill Murray was in talks to play that part. Is that right?
I don't think I never heard that. Maybe if it was, I didn't get the memo on that one. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was cast pretty quickly. He was at that point spending a lot of his time in the Bahamas, and
Mm.
I believe when the studios went out to Gus, he was in India, I believe, and they had to fax him the script page by page, and he said he was when he read the script for the first time, he was sitting there and he would read one page while the next page was coming through on the fax machine. So much has changed. So much has changed.
It's sort of like a page by page cliffhanger, right? I mean, it's a good script, but
I hope.
where's the next page?
That's right. It does kind of interrupt the rhythm of the read.
A lot of the other films that you wrote, I mean, a lot of them are based on real characters and real stories, like the story of Herb Brooks with Miracle, or Penny Chineri with Secretariat. Is there any difference for you when you're writing something like Forrester, which is sort of all made up in the imagination, and other stuff that is following a sort of this based on a true story type of line?
Um, Sheer freedom to do what
Mm,
you want creatively. Always, I mean, there's a saying that in Hollywood, if it says it's based on a true story, that means most of it's kind of following um, the true story. And if it says inspired by a true story, then
mm,
then it's even less. Um, but I always felt a sense of responsibility to Herb Brooks and to the other stories, Penny Chenery and those, because these are real people and they have real reputations, and I don't want to create conflict, despite how important conflict is in the telling of stories, if there was none that really truly existed in their life,
mm,
that we could stand on that ground. And so, for the most part, that never really came into play too much because the stories themselves were so strong that
mm.
we didn't have to resort to that. But it is different. It is different. And if you're asking, do I prefer one over the other? No, I think they're both challenges. But Forrester was the one that just I could take that story in any direction, and that freedom
Mm.
is really energizing.
Were any of the other projects that you wrote things that you started on spec, like Forrester?
Well, I wrote the Nativity Story, which was a small film about
Mm,
the Nativity story, and that one was daunting from a standpoint of in the Bible there's only two of the Gospels that tell that story, and it's very very limited. So when you're trying to come up with speculative dialogue for Joseph and Mary, that's a pretty hefty task. And
mm,
so that project in particular was an intimidating one, but it was another of the spec scripts. I mean, Forrester was a spec script, and that one was as well.
mhm. It's interesting how the other projects that you've made still reflect a lot of those themes that you touched upon in Forrester. I mean, obviously the sports basis, but also the mentor-student relationships, for example, which are in a lot of your stories, or the way that the drama of the story is not really very overblown, and it doesn't go in that direction where, like I said before, where you would expect it to sort of explode in a moment, but it's very subtle. And like in Secretariat, when you have the married couple, which sort of grows apart a little bit because of that story, but it doesn't have that moment that you have in other films where they actually have this big fight, and then there's this big moment where you kind of know, oh, their relationship is lost or something. I think that's very interesting.
I think sometimes, sayings like, ordinary people doing extraordinary things can sound trite, but at the core of it, I really believe that. I
Mm,
love those stories and just unexpected friendships.
mhm,
Uh, you know, those things always pack a lot of power for me, and so I think I'm naturally attracted to those stories. And a lot of the sports stories, like I say, there's a lot of work in those stories because of the fact that we, as globally, when it comes to sports, it's very cut and dried. It's very
mhm.
simple. You either win a game or you lose a game, and that's always fertile ground to work with.
Yeah, and interestingly, when I watched The Rookie, there's this big theme of disappointment, right? The idea that you have all this talent, but your life didn't just go exactly as planned. I mean, whose life does. But in this case, it's really something very like a this melancholy of I don't know, having retreated from this world that you were supposed to go in. And when I saw that, that was a thing that I thought about Finding Forrester, about the same sort of feeling that how the Connery character retreated from this life that was supposed to be his, right? I mean, he could have gone on to this big literary career, but he didn't. Somehow that I saw this. I mean, obviously I sensed it when I saw Finding Forrester, but I really thought about it after watching The Rookie.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I was on the writing team also for Pixar's Cars 3, and
Hmm.
there's always this drive to find a universal truth that everyone can relate
Hmm.
to. And so in that particular film, we were trying to lean on what Cars 1 was, where Lightning McQueen was the brash rookie who didn't have time to hear anybody give him any advice because he had all the answers. And then is mentored by Paul Newman's character of Doc Hudson. And so we saw the opportunity to let's in the final chapter of this trilogy turn it so that now McQueen is the one who is facing the mortality of his career and trying to find meaning in his life, much as Doc Hudson was when he was mentoring McQueen. And we knew we were going to have so much, so many of the things that Doc Hudson said, that Paul Newman said, would be applicable. And Paul had passed away, and so we couldn't tap into that. But he did almost I think it was 20 some hours of voice sessions for Cars 1. And racing is so analogous to life in general that
Hmm.
we went back and we listened to a lot of the stuff that was not used to see if there were gems, if there were little um, hidden jewels in there, which of course there were. And
Hmm.
so that was another story of one character, um, Doc Hudson, walking away from the sport he loved and having regrets about doing
Hmm.
that. It's used in a lot of films because it's a powerful thing to use.
But at least we get one more novel by William Forrester, Sunset,
Yes, we
whereas
do.
we
Right.
never got another novel by Salinger, even though we were promised stuff that was apparently in his estate.
Right.
So,
Right. And that's Jamal's victory,
mhm.
for making that happen. One of my favorite scenes, if not the most favorite scene, is toward the end, and when it's Jamal and Forrester saying goodbye to each other, and it was right after
Mhm.
his monologue, and we even threw in. I thought it would be just a wonderful little moment if Forrester's telling Jamal, that he's gonna that he has a homeland that he hasn't seen in too long, and give
Mhm.
Jamal the opportunity to just kind of jab him a little bit and say, "Oh, you mean Ireland?"
Ireland.
And then just I can hear, Scotland for God's sakes, and but to just see those two at that moment sharing one last look, and then Sean Connery getting up on the bike and riding down Park Avenue in New York. That was a moment of guerrilla cinema because, you know, we just sent Sean on the bike and let him go. And if you watch carefully, you'll see a couple of the heads turning in a couple of the cars because,
Mhm.
I can see those people probably just going, is that Sean Connery that just went by me and he's on a bicycle in New York? Happens every day, I'm sure. But um, but I love that. I love that scene toward the end.
Mhm.
That's a beautiful scene.
Yeah, again, a very
Yeah.
small scene, very quiet scene, I think, but it's a beautiful goodbye. And the funny thing is, I mean, I've seen the film so many times, and somehow I'm always surprised by the fact that then the attorney comes in and says, "Oh yeah, I represent his estate." It's
Yeah,
like I've
yeah,
forgotten that, that this is the actual ending. To me, he keeps living on, and he's gone to Scotland and gone to his roots in a sense.
yeah. And I mean, the last line in there was, "Be sure to write." And
Mm,
uh, and the delivery of that typically is to say, "Hey, write me a letter."
mm,
But with when you're telling William Forrester, "Be sure to write," it means so much more than that. And
mm,
I remember the first time they shot it. Rob had he says, "Make sure you write me." And
mm,
we said, "What? No, no, we had to. No, Rob, you just got to be sure to write." And
mm,
we talked him through that, and he goes, "Ah, yes, okay, yeah." And I just the looks that they share are wonderful. One of my favorite possessions that I have from that movie is I never asked Sean. I never got a picture with Sean.
mm,
Never got a photograph with him. And that was fine. We were, and I look back on it now and I like it that way. But as he was in the home stretch of his life, I sent a copy of the title page of the script, and I said, "Sean, I'd be honored if you would sign that." And he got it right back to me, and it was beautiful, the message that he relayed. It was just, I mean, it's just the fact that I got to do that is, and to work with him and to work with all of them gets richer every year, I think. The movie's,
mm,
been out for so long now, but, the only thing that survives is the film and, uh,
mm.
and what people think of it. And so, Finding Forrester will always be just such a amazing chapter in my life. It really will. And I'm glad I was there for the ride, for sure.
Yeah, it is an amazing film. And like you said in the beginning, before our interview, where your agent told you that you should make films that you can be proud of and show your grandchildren. I mean, this is certainly one that I think will be shown in the future and will be seen and will inspire people in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I never know where it's going to pop up. We, my wife and I met recently. We have neighbors, and they're from Romania, and they had three family members, young guys who were here for a wedding, and we got to talking, and they asked what I did, and I told them what I did, and the one that film that they hadn't seen was Finding Forrester, and I
Mhm.
said, well, you give it a shot sometime. And so the next day I saw them again. They came down and said, we watched Finding Forrester last night, and just to hear them, you know, the baton being passed to another new member of the audience that had never seen it before is always. I always just love to hear what they respond to and see
Mm,
uh, what sequences. It's been a lot of fun. Been a lot of fun.
Well, it's been fun
Yeah.
watching the film so many times and rewatching the film. And I mean, you really gave John Connery, I think, one of the best performances of his career. I mean, he's done a lot of great films, obviously, but this is really one of the best, I think.
I think it's one of his most vulnerable films. I
Mm,
mean, a lot of films, Sean Connery is not going to give a thumbs up to him having a panic attack while attending a basketball game and
mm,
huddling up in a corner. That's but for him to be willing to do that is, I think, in keeping with. I don't know if he at that point knew that he did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen afterwards, but then that was it. And so
mm,
I'm sure he knew that he was in the twilight of his career. But for him to be taking chances and doing things that I mean, that's amazing,
Mm,
that he reaches a point in his career where there's only so many more opportunities to do films. He's still not just willing, but embraces the opportunity to do something new and different. That's so
mm.
admirable.
Yeah, to see an actor, I mean, of his stature and of his talent, at this point in his life, when you can draw on all those decades of experience and on just this whole legacy that he brings with him, right? I mean, people see him and, oh, it's John Connery, and you just immediately think of everything that he did. And to see him at this stage in such a role where you can really sense the depth of not just the part, but also him as a person.
Yeah.
That's really I mean, that was a gift to him, I think.
Well, it was a gift to me, for sure, and to all of us. I remember, you know, F. Murray Abraham. There were times where, we'd be watching a sequence, and he'd whisper to me like, "Can you believe we're working with Sean Connery?" And this was post Amadeus, so he had an
Mm,
Academy Award for Best Actor on his shelf.
mm,
But the man was larger than life for sure,
uh,
for sure.
uh. Yeah, and it's true. I mean, F. Murray Abraham. I mean, we mentioned him a couple of times, but I mean, he is such a fantastic actor, and I think a lot of people don't really focus so much on it because I mean, he always plays the guy that you love to hate, right? I mean, he comes in and he's such I don't know. Holden Caulfield would call him a phony, I guess. um, but yeah, I mean, just the duel between him and Rob Brown, where he throws quotes at him, and Rob Brown just brushes him off and knows everything even before the quote is finished. I mean, that's such a great scene.
Yeah, we were in a rehearsal once on one of those F. Murray Abraham scenes, and it was that scene that you're referencing where you know Rob Brown's character Jamal one-ups him, and the only thing that F. Murray Abraham is left to do is say, get
Mm,
out." And so we were doing that rehearsal, and he pauses at the end of it, and it's magnificent. He's just, magnificent. And he does this big sigh, and he goes, "Well, I guess I'm not going to get the girl this time either." So, and, yeah, everybody acknowledged that, and but boy, was he tailor made for that role for sure.
Yeah. I find this moment so impressive when Forrester does show up in the end, and he sort of puts on his nice face, and he's like all like he's really uh, accommodating and saying, "Oh, what an honor it is to have you here, and please." And I mean, knowing the backstory of his character and his relationship to Forrester, I mean, yeah, it's just such the whole fake smile and the whole I don't know, but still sort of sucking up to this legend showing up in his classroom, right? I mean, just those little moments are he's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, he was terrific. And I mean, Anna Paquin already had she had an Academy Award in her
Mm,
library as well, and she was only maybe 16, you
mm,
know, when she made it. So we had this mix of young and old, and there was just a lot of serendipity on that set. Just things just fell into place, and there was never a moment where we were concerned about the film.
mm,
Um, we had done so much work leading up to it, and the making of the film was in so many ways a celebration rather than a task at that point. Felt great about everything and everyone. Fortunate to be part of that.
There is one line which is quoted from the novel that Forrester wrote from Avalon Landing.
Avalon Landing, yeah.
Yeah, where it says, "The rest of those who came before us does not ease the unrest of those who follow." I was wondering if you had more written of that book, if you had more like passages or moments or an idea of what the book was about?
Yeah, I did. And you know, that was dangerous ground. You know, I was writing for the individual who was a legendary um, author. And I know said the more time I spend with this, the riskier it gets.
Mm.
And so I do have some more stuff, and I have it upstairs. But I've kept that kind of just on my desk because the more you talk, the more power is lost, or more you write. You know, just silence is just. And so Gus was smart to do that. You can see where the scene kind of does a gradual dissolve into the end of the moment, and I think that was the right decision right away. The line you just read though was the line that I was really proud of that line, and that one I think had a lot of substance that carried a lot more weight than just piling on with. So anyway, yeah, Avalon
Cool.
Landing.
Yeah. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what that book might be like or what the theme of the book might be like. But yeah, I also think it's interesting, or I think it's an advantage actually to not have too much of the book in the film, because again, it's something that you can sort of that resonates in your mind, and you can sort of just come up with your own ideas. And it doesn't fall into the trap where, I mean, in some movies you sort of get glimpses from something that is supposed to be legendary, and then you sort of, the more you hear from that work, you kind of notice, oh well, that
You
sounds
really
like
know.
just any other type of book, you know.
Yeah, and that's the other reason too. With the title of the Last Sunset,
Mm,
was I didn't want that to be two or three words. I just wanted it to be one word, and then
mm.
there's a lot you can pull from that title, I think, as to what direction he was going at that point.